Imagine waking up on April 1st, checking your bank account, and your Social Security payment is just gone. No deposit, no warning, no explanation. For millions of American seniors, that nightmare scenario just got terrifyingly real. A bombshell Supreme Court decision has sent shockwaves through Washington, and the ripple effects could hit your retirement income directly. We're talking about a legal battle so significant that financial experts are already warning retirees to prepare for the unthinkable, a potential disruption to Social Security payments this April. Here's what makes this so alarming. This isn't political noise. This isn't fear-mongering. The court's ruling has created a genuine legal gray zone around federal payment authority, and right now, nobody in Washington can give you a straight answer about what happens next. Are you at risk if you're currently receiving Social Security, SSI, or disability benefits? You need to hear what we uncovered. We've broken down exactly what the Supreme Court decided, why it directly threatens April payments, what the Social Security Administration is quietly telling insiders, and most importantly, the 3 steps financial advisors are telling seniors to take right now before the end of March. Because here's the hard truth. The people who get caught off guard will have zero time to protect themselves. The clock is ticking. April is closer than you think. If this information could help even one senior, smash that like button right now so YouTube pushes this to everyone who needs to see it. Let's get started. So let's get right into it, because what's happening right now in Washington is unlike anything we've seen in the modern history of Social Security. And I want you to understand, this isn't about politics. This isn't about which party you support or which side of the aisle you sit on. This is about cold, hard money. Your money. The money you worked 30, 40, sometimes 50 years to earn, the money you were promised, and right now, that promise is sitting in the middle of a legal firestorm that very few people are talking about clearly and honestly. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. Let's start from the beginning, because context matters here. The Supreme Court of the United States recently handed down a decision that fundamentally reshapes the way federal agencies operate. The ruling centers on what legal scholars are calling the limits of executive authority over federal payment systems. Without getting too deep into the legal weeds, here's what you need to understand at its core. The court ruled that certain executive actions taken to control or redirect the flow of federal funds, including entitlement payments, may require additional congressional authorization. In plain English, that means the automatic, guaranteed nature of Social Security payments that we've always taken for granted is now being legally questioned in a way it never has been before. And the April 2026 payment cycle is sitting right in the middle of that uncertainty. Now, you might be asking yourself, how did we even get here? How does a Supreme Court ruling end up threatening the Social Security check of a 72-year-old grandmother in Ohio or a 68-year-old retired factory worker in Michigan? The answer is layered, and it goes back further than most people realize. Over the past several years, there has been an ongoing political and legal battle over the authority of the executive branch to make unilateral decisions about federal spending. Various administrations have pushed the boundaries of what the president and federal agencies can do without explicit congressional approval. The Supreme Court, in this latest ruling, essentially drew a new line in the sand. And unfortunately, Social Security, one of the largest federal expenditure programs in existence, finds itself right on that line. Here's where it gets particularly alarming. The Social Security Administration, which is the agency responsible for processing and distributing your monthly payments, operates under a specific funding and authorization framework. That framework has never really been challenged at this level before. For decades, the payments went out like clockwork. The SSA processed the checks, the Treasury released the funds, and beneficiaries received their deposits. Simple, automatic, reliable. But this Supreme Court ruling has introduced a constitutional question about whether that process can continue without updated authorization language from Congress. And as of right now, Congress has not acted. They have not passed the language needed to clarify the situation. They have not held an emergency session. They have not issued a joint resolution. The legislative calendar is packed, Political tensions are at an all-time high, and the clock is ticking toward April with no clear resolution in sight. Let that sink in for just a moment. We are looking at a scenario where the legal machinery that delivers Social Security payments to over 67 million Americans could experience a disruption, not because the money doesn't exist, not because the government is broke, but because of a paperwork and authorization gap created by a Supreme Court decision that nobody in Congress seems to be rushing to fix. That is the reality of where we are today. Now let's talk about who is most at risk, because this isn't equally distributed. The people who would be hit hardest by even a single missed or delayed payment are the people who depend on Social Security as their primary or sole source of income, and there are tens of millions of them. According to data from the Social Security Administration itself, roughly 40% of Americans over the age of 65 rely on Social Security for at least half of their income. For about 15% of elderly beneficiaries, Social Security is essentially their only income. These are not wealthy retirees with investment portfolios and backup savings accounts. These are people living on fixed incomes, paying rent or mortgages, buying groceries, filling prescriptions, keeping the lights on, all on a monthly payment that arrives like clockwork, or at least it used to. Think about what a single missed payment means for someone in that situation. It means rent doesn't get paid on time. It means choosing between medication and food. It means calling adult children in a panic, borrowing money they may not have, potentially missing other bills that then trigger late fees and credit damage. A single disruption in the payment cycle cascades into a financial disaster for people who have no financial cushion to absorb it. And what makes this even more infuriating is that these are people who earned these benefits. They paid into the system their entire working lives. They held up their end of the deal. The government needs to hold up its end too. So what is the government actually saying about all of this? That's where it gets frustratingly murky. Publicly, officials from both the White House and the Social Security Administration have tried to project calm. Spokespersons have issued statements saying that payments will go out as scheduled, that the agency is monitoring the situation, and that there is no cause for alarm. But behind the scenes, the story is different. Congressional staffers have been quietly briefed on contingency scenarios. Legal teams within the Treasury Department are working around the clock to identify pathways to continue payment disbursement even if the authorization question isn't resolved legislatively. Multiple senior officials have reportedly requested urgent meetings with the Office of Management and Budget to discuss emergency funding protocols. None of that sounds like a situation where everything is fine. None of that matches the calm public messaging. And if you've lived long enough, you know that when the government tells you not to worry, that's usually when you should start paying close attention. There's also the question of what happens in the courts between now and April. Several advocacy groups have already filed emergency injunctions seeking to protect Social Security payments from any potential interruption caused by the Supreme Court's ruling. Those legal challenges are moving through the lower courts, but legal processes take time that retirees waiting on April payments simply don't have. Even if a lower court issues a favorable ruling, it could be appealed, it could be stayed, it could be tied up in procedural delays. The legal system moves at its own pace, and that pace does not care about your rent due date. Meanwhile, Congress is showing very little urgency. There have been a handful of senators and representatives who have spoken out, who have called for emergency legislation to clarify the payment authorization framework. But those voices are in the minority. The majority of Congress is consumed by other battles: budget negotiations, international policy debates, midterm positioning, and Social Security, despite its importance to tens of millions of Americans, keeps getting pushed to the back of the line. That is a failure of leadership. Full stop. And the people who pay the price for that failure are the most vulnerable Americans in the country. Now, let's shift to something practical, because this channel is not just about scaring you, it's about equipping you. So, what should you actually do right now if you're a Social Security beneficiary or if you have a loved one who is? The first and most important thing is to build a small financial buffer if you possibly can. If you have any savings at all, even a modest amount, consider making sure you have access to at least 1 month's worth of your essential expenses in a liquid, accessible account. That means a checking or savings account you can get to immediately. Not a CD, not a retirement account with penalties, not investments you'd have to sell. Cash you can reach within 24 hours. Even having a few $100s set aside could be the difference between a stressful situation and a catastrophic one if April's payment is delayed by even a week or two. Second, contact your representatives. I know that sounds cliche, but it genuinely works when enough people do it. Call your senator's office. Call your congressional representative's office. Send an email. Show up to a town hall if one is scheduled. Tell them you are a Social Security beneficiary and you need them to act immediately to protect April payments. Politicians respond to constituent pressure, especially when an election is on the horizon. Make your voice heard loudly and clearly. Third, stay informed from credible sources. There is going to be a flood of misinformation around this issue over the coming weeks. You're going to see headlines designed to panic you, social media posts with wildly inaccurate claims, and unfortunately some content designed purely to generate clicks rather than inform you. Stick to official SSA communications, reputable news organizations with track records of accuracy, and channels like this one that are committed to giving you real, honest information without the spin. Fourth, if you have a financial advisor, call them this week, not next week, this week. Ask them specifically about your exposure to a Social Security payment disruption and what options you have to protect yourself in the short term. If you don't have a financial advisor, many nonprofit senior service organizations offer free financial counseling for retirees. AARP has resources. Local area agencies on aging have resources. You don't have to navigate this alone. And fifth, talk to your family. If you're a senior who depends on Social Security, have an honest conversation with your adult children or other family members about the situation. Not to frighten them, but to create a plan together. Sometimes just knowing that there's a support system in place, that someone has your back if something goes wrong, reduces the anxiety of facing an uncertain situation. Family communication right now could be the most important safety net you have. Here's the bottom line, and I want to be completely straight with you as we wrap this up. The situation is serious. It is not certain doom. There are still multiple pathways for April payments to go out on schedule, and many experts believe that ultimately, the government will find a way to prevent an actual disruption. But the fact that we are even having this conversation, the fact that a Supreme Court ruling has created even the possibility of a missed Social Security payment is unacceptable. These are not discretionary government programs. These are not political bargaining chips. Social Security is a contractual obligation to the American people, and it needs to be treated with the urgency and respect that obligation deserves. You worked hard, you paid in, you earned every dollar of that monthly payment, and you deserve leadership that protects it without hesitation, without delay, and without political games. So stay informed, take action, prepare where you can, and do not let anyone, not in Washington, not in any courtroom, and not in any political party, tell you that your retirement security is negotiable, because it is not. It never was, and it never should be. Stay with us, because we are going to be covering every development on this story as it unfolds. The coming weeks are going to be critical, and you need to be ready. We'll be right here making sure you have everything you need to protect yourself and the people you love.